All right. What's up, guys? How's everyone doing? Nice. Love it. My name's Amber. If I don't know you, I'm the director of young adults here, and we are so excited about tonight. We're so excited if you guys are joining us online or whatever. I don't even know which camera to look at, but first things first, just real quick, there's like a hot tub here. We're not baptizing anyone tonight. That'd be a weird way to end the night. We're talking about sex and porn and relationships, and then we're going to just dunk you. Not going to do it. We're not going to do it. But we do have Easter services coming up, so whether you call this place home or not, you are invited and you are welcome. All of our campuses across all of our campuses, we are going to have Easter services both Saturday and Sunday. So you can go on our website and find out more about that, and we will have baptisms on Sunday. Excited about that. All right, so here is how tonight is going to go. We're going to get started right away. We don't have any music tonight or anything tonight. Hopefully you guys know what you walked into. Tonight is all about you all asking your questions and starting a conversation. And so we're going to pop up this slide behind us. Everyone can take out their phones. You can scan this QR code. Someone on Instagram was like, how do I ask my questions? And I was like, you'll be able to ask them that night. She was like, oh, I'm not speaking in front of people. I'm like, don't worry. You can scan this. This will take you to a page where you can submit anonymous questions. And I mean that. They're anonymous. We cannot tie them to you whatsoever. So if you actually want to talk to somebody about these questions, hang out afterward and come find me or Christian or even some of the panelists. And we would love to meet with you guys and talk to you guys about these questions. But tonight, you're just submitting them anonymously. We have no idea who's asking them. Sound good? So just pull this page up. You can keep it with you throughout the whole night, and you can refresh the page. So I am really excited about tonight because in my journey with God and in my faith, I've grown, or am still growing, in one of three ways, or in all of these ways. I've grown through a small group in a church community, and people I can just get in a circle with and actually open up God's word, read it, and talk about it. As simple as that. I've grown through mentors, and some of my mentors are here tonight, and they're joining us on the panel. And people have just sat across the table from me, let me be crazy, ask questions, and then they've also walked me through some tools on how to read scripture for myself and make my faith my own. And then I've grown from nights like tonight, where I just have actually a safe place where I can ask questions and be like, is the roof gonna fall down on me? Is someone gonna judge me for that? So if you're wondering if that's gonna happen, no. You can actually ask questions tonight. We are not promising that we'll have all the right answers. That's not what this is about. We're not promising that we'll answer perfectly, but we are going to start a conversation. And I don't know about you, but I have never been in a church environment, like a church building, look around, in a church environment where I can actually ask questions about these types of things. Relationships, love, sex, porn, dating, singleness, the struggles, the good, the bad, the ugly, the highs, the low. I've never experienced that in a church. And I love this place so much for that reason. We're a place that we always say we're going to hang on to grace and truth. Not one over the other, not one without the other. Both grace and truth. And that's who we are, and that's what tonight is all about. Everyone who's going to be joining me on stage comes with a story. Everyone who's joining me on stage, they're probably too humble to tell you that they're credible, but at the same time, they're humble enough to know that they are weak and they need Jesus, and they're doing their best to hang on to him. That's why I love them. And so we will unabashedly be a community that is going to point us back to Jesus, of course. We believe that Jesus actually offers a better way of life for us, actually has a roadmap to life for us, even if it's challenging and different. We trust him. We actually think he has a better way of life for us. So that's what tonight is all about. We're going to do our best to do that and to answer your questions or to just open the door and start a conversation. We're not going to get to everyone tonight, maybe not even all the topics, but we want to be devoted to opening the door and having these conversations. So 2 things on that. If you are not involved in a small group, I would encourage you, if something is kind of prompted tonight, if you kind of get that tap on your shoulder, that's nothing that we did up here, nothing that we said. It's probably God, and it's probably the Holy Spirit maybe tapping you on the shoulder. I would say get in a small group and start talking to some of those people about it. Some of these guys will stick around afterward. Feel free to ask them questions afterward. And then you can always reach out to us. We're always willing to engage in conversation, grab coffee with you, whatever else. Sound good? Cool. So without further ado, will you guys please help me welcome our panel for tonight? Yeah, so it's good. All right, here they are. Real quick, we'll start with you, Brandon. Is that cool? Yeah, you're right here. Woo! Will you just give everybody an idea of who you are, high-level view? Tell them who Brandon is. You're maybe not on.
Should I talk louder? There we go. Hey, so my name is Brandon. I'm on staff here at Flatirons, and I am a 30-something that's not married, single, and I feel super unqualified to be up here, but here we are.
But you ain't.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
My name is Julie.
Nice, Brandon.
My name is Julie. This is my husband, Scott.
Take his mic.
My name is Julie, and this is my husband, Scott. We've been married almost 28 years. We have 3 kiddos, 21, 20, and 17, and that's an adventure all in itself. Amber and I have just gotten to know each other over the last couple of years, and I think that's why I'm up here, but thank you.
Got a lot of wisdom.
I'll see if mine works. Hey, it works. My name is Scott, my wife Julie. So, let's see, we were in a young married class when I was 24, 25 years old, and they had a bunch of people my age up on stage giving advice, and I thought, man, these people are so old and have no idea what's going on. So when you look at me and my wife and say they're so old, we have no idea what's going on, you're right, but we will do the best we can to try to relate some of the things that we learned when we were your age a while ago.
Awesome.
Nice. First try.
Yes.
My name is Taylor, and I am currently in process to do international ministry in the Netherlands. Obviously not there yet. And I am in a long-distance relationship representing the dating side of things.
Nice.
Hey guys, I'm Shelly, and this is my husband Jason. We've been married almost 22 years, and same, like feeling like the oldies coming in, and y'all are gonna be like, who are these people, and do they know anything?
Are you jealous that we don't have a cheering section like Taylor?
Exactly, seriously. We have 3 boys. Our oldest is 14, 11, and 8. And Jason.
We're glad to be here.
Yeah. If you guys don't have mentors yet, then I would just start praying about them, because you need them. These 2 women right here have mentored me in this last season of my life, and I'm so lucky to have them, and you need people like them. Don't steal them from me, though. So don't get any ideas. I'm just kidding. All right, I think we're going to kick it off with our first question. What important qualities should I look for in another person as a Christian who wants to date? That's a great question. I'm going to throw this one out to the entire panel, so any thoughts that you guys have in general? Maybe Taylor. We'll start with Taylor. I'm looking at you.
Well, I can say so. Yeah, okay. I mean, I know for myself, I really wanted to marry a man that I really felt like only had eyes for me, which I know was not a part of our story, unbeknownst to me. But that was really something that was important to me, was faithfulness. And I don't know,
I think we should just rip a Band-Aid and you should go into depth more about that, so there's no ambiguity.
Yeah,
What do you mean by
so Jason and I, we dated for 5 years, and about 3 years into our marriage, I had been suspicious, but I ended up confronting him, and he confessed to me that he had not been faithful to me. and I had thought it was just one affair, but it was a whole lot more than that, including porn and masturbation, but also acting out with other women. So that's ripping the Band-Aid off. If you want to say anything else about.
Yeah, I think knowing knowing how big a deal in dating for Shelley, knowing how big a deal it was, and I didn't understand the gravity, but knowing how big a deal that faithfulness was, and her, I don't know how to describe that, but just that reality that for her feeling so chosen was so important. That also, I use that in my brain to go further into hiding. Like, I want to be with her, so I'm not going to tell her that because that'll end the relationship. And so I don't know where our conversation, going back to the question, what would I look for in another person is the sense that they will be vulnerable with you at the deepest level. And you can feel some of that in your gut when you're dating. You can't know for sure, obviously, like we have, especially when somebody's a good liar, me. And then that vulnerability to tell you the worst of the worst, the ugliest of the ugliest. Because if you can do that, especially in dating, you set the foundation for a tremendous marriage.
That's so good. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
I guess just to piggyback off of that, I would say vulnerability for sure is huge, and the courage to be vulnerable about the stuff that you don't want to tell them. And with that, I would also say humility is huge too. And yeah, being able to learn from the person that you're dating and to listen and just to work through challenges that will come up even in dating. I think humility is key for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I was a non-believer when I met Julie, and she was a believer. So I was looking for someone who was good looking, was the most characteristic I was looking for. Just be totally honest with you guys. That was first and foremost. And then as I met Julie, and she is good looking, and
Check.
still good looking, very good looking. But one of the things is she had the light of Christ in her. I'd never met someone who was so authentic. There was no hidden agenda. There was just something unique about her that I'd never seen in any other woman that I had come across dating beforehand. And so I think her staying true to her walk with Christ was very winsome to me. It was something I had not seen. That was who she was. And she wasn't putting any airs. She wasn't trying to impress me. She was just who she was. And I think so just the authenticity is something I'd be looking for.
That's awesome. Do you want to add to that, Julie? You're very good looking. Yeah, beautiful.
Although we dated and he was not a Christian, I would not have married him, and I knew that from the very beginning. And I think as a Christian, you have to know your boundaries before you're in those situations, because it's really hard when you get emotionally or physically down the road with someone who go, oh, whoa, 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 you're at my line. So I knew as we were dating that I wasn't going to marry him if he didn't know Jesus, if he wasn't walking with Jesus. So we were having fun, having a great time, but through a process of me getting a job in another state and going away and realizing he was chasing after Jesus all of a sudden, and it wasn't because I was here. It wasn't because he was doing it for me. So there was a lot to our story that hasn't been told. But as a Christian, I think I needed to have my boundaries. I needed to know where my lines were. I needed to know, okay, this is outside of what I'm gonna allow myself to do.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Sure.
You don't have,
I think there's the churchy answer of there's the desire that I have to find someone that's a Christian, but also that loves Jesus so much that she gets her worth, her purpose, and her value out of knowing that Jesus loves her. Because as much as I hope that I'll be able to be faithful and honor all those commitments, that if someday I'm able to get married and say all those, traditional things like at the end of the day, I'm going to wound her and I'm going to mess up, and I don't want her to completely break in having all of her worth, purpose, and value in me, but someone that is constantly striving to try to figure out or realign with, hey, Jesus is where I feel the most complete, and Jesus is the one that fills my cup, because that's a struggle for me too, right? Trying to figure out what it is that distracts from that. So someone that's also pursuing becoming a better version of themselves, especially with their relationship with Jesus, is a super attractive quality. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I forgot the question halfway through, but that was really good. Also, I put a lamp right between me and the screen, so turns out you guys can read these questions. That was really good. Good start. Let's go on to the next question, because there's going to be a lot. I feel like my dating standards are too high, but how do I know if they're unrealistic? It's a really good question.
I'm curious what too high is. Can we?
Yeah.
Would that person stand up? Just kidding.
I have some questions for you before I answer.
And
What
I
would that look
wonder, I think that I really wrestled with this a lot. Like, I don't know if the too high standard is coming from the church and Christian culture, or outside culture, whatever, the world, or whatever you want to call it. But I really wrestled with, like, my standards at one point in my life were so low that you could be anyone and everybody, and I was the person who was in and out of unfaithful relationships, but I would rather be in that relationship than be alone, because I was feeling this massive void in my life. And then I just swung this pendulum in my mid-20s, where I was like, well, I can't do that anymore, so I gotta have these super high standards that I think I can look back and say were a little unrealistic, because I had this like Romeo and Juliet picture in my head. So like this person, yes, he'll be God-honoring and he'll be all of these good qualities that you should be looking for, but then in my head, I wasn't holding myself to any of these things. Do you know what I mean? So I love the question, because ultimately this is between you and God. You know, like, we can't actually tell you if your standards are too high or unrealistic. You should have standards according to the Bible and what Jesus says right and true. And at the same time, like, are you looking in the mirror, you know? And is there an area of your life that needs to be adjusted to the standard that you've set for other people? If that makes sense. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I'm going to come at it from a different angle, from maybe a sex perspective.
Good.
So when we were married, I had not waited. Lived the fraternity lifestyle, had multiple partners in college. My wife, my girlfriend at the time, had waited for marriage. And so those worlds collided when we started dating, started about getting engaged. And I remember asking her, like, I couldn't believe that someone could actually wait until their marriage to have sex. And she said, I said, how did you do it? And she said, I couldn't look at my husband in the face, and my future husband, and say that he wasn't worth waiting for. And I was blown away. And it impacted me in such a way that I didn't know where we were going to go in our relationship, but she talked about her boundaries the way she answered her last questions. I knew that was a boundary, and I wanted to honor that, because it was someone who had set a boundary, had lived up to that standard, and I was like, wow, and it made me want to be a better person and a better version of myself, if that makes sense. So, I don't know if that helps.
Avery, I loved what you said about readjusting even the standards that you have for yourself, but as I continue to try to learn about myself, or figure out where my blind spots are, I've realized there's a lot of times when I'm living out of fear that I'll come up with unrealistic expectations as a protection mechanism, or as a wall. And I think trying to, again, work on myself and work on my relationship with Jesus, or figuring out, like, hey, is this, like, really a deal breaker for you? Or is this just something that, like, there's fear of for some reason or another?
Us an example of that. What's one wall that you...
I feel like I should be able to give you an example of that.
Sorry.
I can't think of an example right now.
That's okay. It's a good sentiment. It's good.
Sorry,
No.
I failed.
We'll come back. We'll give you a C- on that one, but next time. I'm just kidding.
I didn't know there's a report card.
They're never coming back.
Do we get voted off the island throughout the night, or how does that work?
Do you guys want to vote Brandon out?
I know.
Oh, they like you.
They text that anonymously,
They
and
like you.
if they want
Yeah.
to take a poll.
Yeah, they like you. We're keeping you.
I'm
Cool.
going to chime in one quick thing there.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who used to be on staff here, he would say, it's one thing to be single wishing you were married. It's a whole different thing to be married wishing you were single. And man, I feel like that, it's hard to conceptualize that, when you're not in it. And when you're single, because I'd like to just at least get there and find out if that's real, find out for myself and that kind of thing. But I would rather see the standards high and a lot of singleness than the standards lower and a lot of bad Christian marriages.
That's really good.
Because the statistic is going to go up for Christian divorces when that's the reality.
No, that's really good. Can you talk about, in your guys' experience, what should those high standards be as a believer?
Shelley?
I still want details from the person that submitted the question.
That's fair.
I have to think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll have to come back to that.
I don't think I have specific standards that I would say, but marriage is really awesome when you're both working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
But if you come in, with Scott and my history, we had different families. I was raised in the church, he wasn't raised in the church, so there's differences already, although we were both chasing Jesus when we got married. But everything, even the way you put the toilet paper on the roll is, we didn't do it the same way. That sounds funny, but that was one of the things that when you're first married, those are the stupid things you argue about.
Well, let's be clear. There's a certain way you should do it.
There. Okay, tell me which way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
No one told me that. I know now, though. I know now.
It's over.
But you laugh, but those are things that in a marriage, they just drive you insane or drive you crazy. So marriage is awesome and beautiful and such a great thing if you're working towards it together. And if you're already having second thoughts as you're dating, I would step back and really reconsider. Don't just marry because it's a warm body or somebody that you like hanging out with. Really make sure you're on the same path and you're going the same direction. So
What she said.
Bottom line, I think high standards are okay, is what I
Yeah.
don't know, yeah.
I would just add, I listened to Andy Stanley's podcast on relationships, and I don't know if that's where you got it, but he said, become the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. And when I listened to that podcast, I was like, well, I have no idea who I'm looking for. I couldn't make a list of qualities. And something else that he said was to read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and that's the section that's all about love. Love is patient and kind. And I thought that was a really good place, at least for me, to start of these are the qualities I should look for in love and in another person, and also I should maybe bring as something to work on in myself as well. So.
That's great. Good perspective. What do you?
I think I'm coming back to giving an example. I think there's a couple that I don't want to share, but I think I'm noticing a theme of just, especially things in my life that I feel like compete with me getting my worth, purpose, and value out, in Jesus. And so there's a big one for me, and that's money, or getting my worth as a man in my job or my career, or being able to provide. And just realizing that for a long time, I felt like I wanted to find someone that was on a similar level that I was in a financial sense. And then trying to get to the point now where somebody said that, I just want to make sure now that we have the same goals, towards money, right? So whether I'm in debt up to my eyeballs or loaded, or vice versa, hey, what is the root of that? Like, what are our goals later? Do we want to retire? Do we want to be able to give? Do we want to be able to, like, tithe back to the church? Like, making sure we have the same goals with that, because I also see in so many of my friends, and I've seen in relationships before, that tends to be a tough thing sometimes.
Yeah. I also kind of just want to add, like, I think we might live in a time where, especially being a believer, like if you follow Jesus, it can feel like your standards are way too high. Because at least when I see, I feel like there's more of a temptation to be like, that's good enough. Like that's so close, and I can't wait much longer, and I'm not getting any younger, and I want to have kids by a certain age, and all of those things, which are very real and realistic. So I think there's more of a temptation, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, to lower our standards. And so these Christian standards or whatever, God's idea for our life, God's best for our life, can feel lofty when really they're just good, So give yourself some grace. Like, let yourself off the mat. I don't think they're unrealistic.
I'm okay with last. I know we need to go to the next one. One of the
That's
things
good.
I'm in with there. An unrealistic standard is that the person that you're signing up for life with won't change.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about marriage is, like, over the next couple decades, like, you're going to change. You're going to change. They're going to change. And part of the beauty is learning those changes together and experiencing those changes together. So there's a reality there that, like, you're signing up for something that's going to be different next year, and somebody who's going to be different a decade from now. And there's a lot of, like, beauty and good, and there's a lot of, like, positive experience in that, but it would be an unrealistic expectation to think they're not going to change.
That's really good perspective. That was a good question. Good job. You sure you don't want to stand up?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next one. I've struggled with the why behind no sex before marriage. Can you explain this? Here we go.
Our God is a loving God, and I think He gives us boundaries to protect us and to show us His love for us. And it's just like with our kids when they were little, I would let them have freedoms, or they thought they had freedoms, but there was always a fence. I didn't let them go outside without the fence to protect them. And God is protecting us from ourselves sometimes.
Deep. So, yeah, the why is because it creates a lot of unintended consequences. In college, it leads to really, really hard questions where your fiance or soon-to-be fiance says, "How many girls? How often? What do you guys do?" The insecurities it caused in my wife of, are you comparing me to these girls in the past? Me fighting not replaying those tapes of those girls in the past when we're not connecting sexually. There's a lot of why. I mean, it's, God just, what you said, God sets that fence, like, hey, don't do this. He doesn't say all the reasons why you shouldn't, because they are too many to list out. I mean, they just ripple effect. It's, hey, you lose your testimony to your teenage kids. We're like, well, Dad, you didn't wait, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's the real world application of the why. Does that make sense?
Every time, so every sexual experience, from the full thing to stuff short of that, right? And we can all use our imagination and name those things, but let's don't. Every sexual engagement, you're giving a part of yourself away. You're giving a part of yourself away. It may only be a very small sliver of yourself, or maybe a big chunk of yourself. So every time that you engage sexually before marriage, you're giving a part of yourself away. You're losing a part of yourself to that other person. So when you finally land at the one who's going to be from here on out, you're not as whole as you could have been. And that person is missing out on all of you. Vice versa, you miss out on some part of them. Can God redeem that, and does he over time? Sure. In totality, I don't know. But there's a did I mention sometimes I'm going to get on a soapbox?
It's good.
So
you can stand
I can?
if you want.
Is that, do I lose grade if I stand?
Go ahead.
So there's this reality, like in our culture that deep connected intimacy is like a mirage. Like, especially, okay, I'm gonna try to be careful on my soapbox. Deep connected intimacy is a mirage. Like for so many people, they long for and yearn for this deep connected, known and being known relationship, but it's really hard to feel the depth and gravity of that and God's design for that when 3/4 of you was in your past with other people.
Yeah.
Right? And again, can that be redeemed, and does God redeem that? Yes. We have experienced some of that redemption, and that's a really sweet thing. But when it comes to the sex before marriage piece, I think sometimes we get hung up on the mechanics of how much and too far is too far, and what's the why behind it, what's the tangible result? Some of the tangible result is you'll miss out on some of the deepest connected intimacy in the relationship for the way God designed it.
Wow. Wow.
Off the soapbox.
Well, and I, just as you're talking and just kind of hearing what you guys said, I can say that it has made sexual intimacy with Jason easier because he's been my only partner. And at the same time, we also have the other piece of that. Like, I'm not his only partner, but I can tell you, I am so grateful that I went into marriage as a virgin, because it has, yes, things have been complicated, but it has made it less complicated. And I'm curious if you guys would feel the same way. Like, it's just taken those questions, like you were talking about, Scott, that Julie would ask. Just there's not, it just makes it less complicated. And so I'm grateful.
Well, and it goes back to the standard question too. Because of my standards, I didn't have any standards. I brought a lot of shame. Shame was a big piece. Like the why. Well, when you have someone who's waited and thought you were worth waiting for, even though I didn't know you, and I'm saying, but you weren't worth waiting for. It's shame. There's a lot of shame. And our first 2 years of marriage in the sexual arena was brutal as we try to work through that.
This is a really good question. And I feel like you can hear a pin drop in the room for a reason. Because either this comes with a lot of like heaviness and weightedness and maybe shame, or like it is a very fair question. Like, tell me why. The church has constantly bashed this over my head or said it in the wrong way, like no sex before marriage. Well, what a unloving, restrictive God would do that? But then I love what you said, Jason, like to Jason's point, it's like sex is set apart, which is, it's holy. Holiness is, it's set apart. And anything that's set apart is reserved for something better. So I did not wait until marriage. My husband did not wait until marriage. And we both still have conversations, just navigating. I think that God has brought a lot of redemption. We waited together. And so there can be healing. And at the same time, this is not our first time. And I think it can feel like God is restricting us from something good, but he's holding out for something better because he's a good God and he created it. And for so long, it was just a matter of like, either I trust God or I don't. Either he created all things or he didn't. If he created me in his image, I am part of his creation, then sex wasn't some like afterthought or some like culturally experienced or explored thing. It was God's design, so he must know how it works best. And it turns out like I can speak a little bit from experience that I did experience that in my relationship with my husband, waiting until marriage for the first time in my life. When sex before was like, me and my friends were like, what's your number? Like that was me and my friends. When we came back from college, where you at? And then with him, it was like, we couldn't even really articulate all of the why, but we were like, well, we've seen that God's been faithful in our life with other things, so we're gonna try this one out and see if he'll be faithful with this one. I mean, really, we were like, we're gonna try. And it wasn't only possible, like I thought it was impossible to wait till marriage, nonetheless have a man who was willing to wait till marriage. I never thought that existed in this world, no way. And then here he is. Connie, you wanna stand? That's my husband. Hey, that's my dude. Anyways, I hope I'm doing this justice. I can speak from experience that it took our relationship to a new level of intimacy, literally. We removed all the physical and we went deep in other areas. And then we introduced the physical in marriage, and it was actually a gift, you know?
I have one more thing to go on that. I think as a culture, we've separated sex from everything else. Sex is over here, and then the emotional part of our relationship is over here. When it's reserved for a relationship that you're committed to for the rest of your life, and you've got to work on this, there's something so different. When it's over, there's no shame, there's no regrets, there's giggles. You know, it's not, oh my goodness, what did I just do? Or what did we just do? It is you're completely naked and you're unashamed and you're known. And it's beautiful. And I think you're all worth waiting for.
Go ahead. And then I think I'm supposed to speed it up, but this is really good.
Okay. Well, as we're talking, I'm just thinking, you know, kind of the assumption is that everyone's having sex or struggling to not wait until marriage. And the culture I grew up in, and being in a legalistic Christian home was do not have sex. I don't know that do any of you relate to that? Like, just like that legalistic, yeah, maybe some. Okay, and so I also think that as a church, we need to be talking about what that looks like as well, because for me, I was terrified of sex because I'm such a rule follower, and I was like, I will not. I'm not tooting my horn when I say, you know, I was a virgin when I got married. I was like terrified of boys and wasn't about to go there. And so it was really challenging when we did get married, and the first night, I hope you're okay with me saying this, we did not have sex.
Did I have a choice?
I mean, it didn't happen. We tried. Anyways.
You can't flip the switch like that. You go from like it's all bad to game on. It doesn't. Some people can. We didn't.
So we've got a lot. We've got a situation here, but anyways. So I think that also, like, we also need to pull that in as a part of the conversation that some of us as Christians, like, it's really hard to go from do not to go for it and really understand what that looks like. And anyways.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
It's good to know we have a situation too.
Yeah. We'll come back to your situation. All right, we're gonna move on actually to our next question. I think we have a lot. Oh, is masturbation a sin?
A lot going on here. Okay. So biblically, the Bible doesn't say whether masturbation is sin. It doesn't say do it. It doesn't say don't do it. There are people that'll make a case for different things. Old Testament, owning, spilling a seed, which is about a cultural norm, not necessarily masturbation. But there's a couple different ways that people will slice and dice it to try to say that it is or isn't a sin. But I think at the end of the day, my reading and understanding is that it doesn't say either way. What I would say is instead of asking the question on that, since it's not explicitly defined, I think asking the question on that is like, is it really healthy and helpful? And if you think more globally in terms of the way that God designed sexuality to be this, as Ambry said a minute ago, this set apart experience between a man and woman, and this thing that is holy and sacred, masturbation on some level is demeaning that. It's degrading that. It's not set apart. It becomes something that's very a part of for most people when they're engaging it. And then the second thing on that, sorry, y'all, I'm just over here on my soapbox. The second thing on that is if that is between two, if that's sexual intimacy between two people, and all I'm doing is one person with me, even if I've got the other person in my mind, I've still divided and divorced what the meaning of it was in terms of a bonding between two people. I've taken that sexual thing and made it a self-centered thing. Right? So I would say, is it a sin? It's not clear. Is it healthy and helpful? I would say no, and it's robbing you of something relationally in the long run. That's my 2 cents. Next question.
Drop the mic. One
I
more.
would also, just to add, I thought that was great, but I've heard to think about like what is the desire beneath the desire, and I think that that is so key with this, just because there's usually something deeper going on, and a lot of the time you're short-circuiting that if you go to a different place for that deeper desire, which ultimately is not healthy. Again, can't tell you if it's a sin or not, but yeah, usually not healthy.
So, I have teenage boys, and this is something we've talked about. And one of the ways we've addressed it is the verse about when I was a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became an adult, I put away childish things. And it's part of a maturation process. And for me, so when I struggled, and I can actually say when, because it is a past tense, but when I struggled with masturbation, it was sinful the way I was doing it. I mean, like, my thought life was not about my wife. It was about, oh, why do you wait before sex, before marriage? Why do you wait till sex or marriage? Because I was masturbating to the women I had before I was married. So, yeah, in my case, it was clearly sinful, right? So I loved Jason's soft, is it helpful? It was really cool. And yet, I'm like, man, for me, it totally was. So, I mean, it was very sinful. That's, yeah.
Thanks, Scott. Cool. Do you have anything to add, Brandon? Just putting you on. Okay. All right, we're moving on.
She's picking on me.
You're the closest to me.
That's why she put.
Good question. How do I combat loneliness while single? Let's go to you first, Brandon.
I knew that was going to happen. Yeah, I think I don't think there's a good answer for that. I think for me personally, and I would venture to guess, I've said this before, I'd venture to guess for most people in this room, Satan's number one tool that he uses against me is making me feel alone. And when I feel alone, that's when I start to listen to the voices in my head, and I start to spiral, and generally I start to make less smart decisions. And when he can get me alone, he can get me to believe so many things that aren't true about me. And I think I think it's tough, because then when you're feeling lonely and you're alone, again, it's this never-ending cycle. But I think the thing that's helped me the most combat that is stepping outside of my comfort zone, or having a community of people around me that I can lean on and be vulnerable with and admit that I'm alone. And I think that's what's so cool about something like tonight is, again, this is a venue where I don't feel like we typically, or at least I've experienced in my life, where we can come to a church and talk about like, hey, here we are, a bunch of people trying to figure out how to do this thing called life in the best way possible that Jesus says is the best way. And for those of us in the room that are single, especially when you come out of a time that we're living in with a pandemic or with COVID and so many unknowns and almost an encouragement to isolate and to quarantine and to be alone, it's difficult. And I think that's why this here is such a gift, is if it's a choice. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's really, really hard to be vulnerable and share things that seem weak or that seem that are just hard to talk about. But in this room, there's absolutely a way to find community and invest in that. And I think that's what we're called to do, like as Christians, is be in community with other people.
That's good.
Add something real quick. You can still feel alone when you're married, by the way. And Satan does want to isolate you and think that you're the only one who has this issue. And if it wasn't for a community of other young married couples that we met through a church, we would not still be married today. Because we were married and still felt alone. That didn't go away just because we were married. Right?
Yeah. Community. Find community. Get in a small group. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. I need to help me read these. What are healthy boundaries in a relationship based on Christian sexual ethic? Healthy boundaries. That's a very good question.
I think that kind of piggybacks off the last question on, especially when I know that I'm in a relationship with someone that I like, then I feel like feelings and desires for intimacy just are greater. And when I'm trying to navigate those things alone, Satan's really good at feeding me the things in those moments that I do want to hear. And I think that's what's also so important to being in community with people, is talking through that stuff, even if it's uncomfortable or out of the norm, to be trying to put good boundaries up, because I think that's when you have people that are holding you accountable. And I think I really do think it can be different for different people. But I think while there's some things that are spelled out that I've seen in the Bible, I think there's so much gray area. And I think that's why it's important to be in community with other people to try to figure that out, and like iron sharpening iron to figure out how to set those boundaries.
Yeah, I agree. You got something, Tay?
Yep. I would also say something key in a relationship is communication. So clear communication about boundaries from the very beginning. And also making sure you're on the same page. Because if you are dating someone who you like and are attracted to, it's so easy to go past your boundaries. And if you aren't both working towards the same goal, it's really hard to be successful. And I would say, even go so far as like to debrief after you've like gone to a new level or something is super important. And just to make space to voice when maybe you crossed a boundary accidentally or discovered a new boundary that you didn't even know you had before. Clear and open communication is key, I think, for this.
Back to the high standard thing. So I'm talking to the women in the room. If he won't hold and lead on y'all's standards around a Christian sexual ethic while you're dating, it'll be really hard for him to hold that standard when y'all are married. If he'll lead well in this area in your dating, it's going to go really well when y'all get married. And so as men in the room, I agree with what Taylor said. If we can both be on the same page, that's really important. And if you'll lead that, it's going to go really well. If you're the one that says these are where the lines are, like not unilaterally, like I'm dictating, not that kind of thing, but y'all agree, like we're not crossing these lines, and you're the one that says we're getting out of the car, we're getting out of the room, we're going somewhere public and being with you. You're the one that keeps leading that. Her respect for you will go through the roof. And it'll change when y'all are married, the way that y'all experience relationship especially in that sexual realm, but also in other realms, it will be radically different if you'll lead on the front end.
Very true. Oh. I would say we talked about boundaries early on and found out really quickly that we also had to talk about why, because we, like started slipping into some gray area, and then we were like, well, it can't just be because the Bible said so, because that just feels like this legalistic checklist. And I would go back to one of you, what they said. I would say everyone is different. I know some people where it's like wisdom would say you should set some boundaries that say I'm going to go home at a certain time. Or wisdom would say that, yeah, we're going to go into a pub. I don't know. And some people, I don't know. This is a gray area in Scripture. But we found out really quickly, it was like when we came back together after we had like slipped up a bit, we were like, it's not just because like the Bible said so and it's a set of rules. It's because we've seen that God's been faithful in our life, and so we're trusting him. So we're hanging on to something that we think is actually going to be good again. And when one of us would like be weaker than the other, it seemed like one of us would be strong. That was weird. So that could have been a sex joke, right? There were people chuckling. Move on.
D-. D-.
For sure, that was a D-. Move on. Okay, how am I supposed to know how to have good sex when I'm married without having sex or looking to something like porn? So I'm assuming this person is holding out or, saving themselves. How am I supposed to know how to have good sex when I'm married without having sex or hooking up? Or, go ahead, Shell.
We're all like, I just, my first thought, I'm going to have a great answer tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, but for now,
I'll call you.
The situation. Sex is wonky, and I think just, no, seriously, just yeah, and as I read this, I'm like, well, hold up, good sex, that's so subjective, and I think more so going in with a posture of wanting to love the other person, wanting to experience pleasure, and it not being perfect from the get-go. I wish, so we were toddlers, I feel like, when we got married. Not really, but we were really young when we got married. And I so wish I could just tell my younger self not to take it so seriously, and for it to be more of just like this, a lifelong adventure that Jason and I are going to go on. And so I don't know that I'm answering the question, but I would love to reframe. Where's this pressure coming from to go into marriage and have good sex? No, I've already told you guys, we didn't even have sex the night of our wedding. So I know,
That's good.
Yeah. And let's just start with we're somehow equating good sex with porn. That's problematic, right? Because that's a very distorted sense of sexual intimacy. Because it really is sex, it's not really very intimate, right? And so so I go back to what Shelley said. Boy, if we could frame it up as this adventure of discovery of self and other person, and kind of the adventure of it being wonky and not like you see in videos, and it's awkward when you bang teeth together and you're trying to make out, and it's I've heard. Heard that happen. Or you can't.
No.
Okay, yeah. But y'all get the point. It's it just is, and that's part of the thing. That's part of the beauty of the relationship. Again, is you're walking through this together, and it's weird, and it's just not like you saw in the movies or on the internet, and that's okay. There's something really sweet in that awkwardness too.
That's so good. I love that. Yeah. I think that's really good. For sake of time, are you guys okay with moving on to the next one? If you guys want to chat more about that, that's a great question afterward. you can come talk to any of these people, right? Let's go to the next one. Does God still love me if I'm gay? Can you have a relationship with the same sex? How does being gay affect your faith? Thank you for asking that question.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say something really. Oh, was someone else? Absolutely, God loves you if you're gay. I'm just going to start there and
Start there.
absolutely.
Yep. I also want to call out, to my knowledge, like none of us have experienced same-sex attraction, unless you guys want to speak to that. And so to some degree, I'm
You could have just made that really awkward right there.
so.
F.
Do you guys want to vote me off? Yeah, I think I should leave now. No, I just want to. I want to be tender to the people in the room, the person in the room, and know, like, I can't empathize, I guess. But I love the question. I want to acknowledge it and talk on it, but I just can't empathize.
I was going to say, years ago, I had the opportunity to mentor a gay man who was married to a woman, had a child, realized he was gay, and they got divorced, and came to the church with almost the exact same question, and we got connected. And I walked alongside him for years, and he is a wonderful, beautiful man who loves God and is pursuing him imperfectly like the rest of us are. You know, and that would be the thing I would say is, like, he loved God. He wanted to honor God. He was doing everything he could to be celibate, to fight that desire that he had. And we walked some really hard times together, and he was just a wonderful man. And so there's a lot of that question. Can you relate with same sex? Boy, it's so hard. I mean, I know it goes back to what you said about setting apart the sexual relationship between a man and a woman. God has created that. A same-sex relationship is just hard. It's just a harder way to do life. It just is. And I don't think it's an example of God's best, if that makes sense. So I want you to see that I'm saying in a loving way. Not from a judgment place, but I just know it's a hard road.
Yeah. So I think how does it affect your faith? Like, I won't call any names, but I know there's people in this room who could speak to that. And I think that's the people that you should be talking to. Because I don't know. I don't know how it affects your faith. But does God still love you? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is God still near? Absolutely. Does God still have a plan for your life? Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I'm going back to the whole Satan making you feel alone thing.
Yeah.
I think our culture is interesting, but at least from my perception of the church, having a same-sex attraction has a very, very negative connotation. And I feel like in a setting especially like this, it's easy. It would be easy for Satan to get a hold of those thoughts of God not loving a person if that's what they're feeling, right? If that's what they're experiencing.
Yeah. Can we just promise to, like, continue to have this conversation, I guess? I'm going to move on to the next question, but this door is open, and we're going to keep it open. We're going to keep having these conversations. So how do I combat shame from my sexual experiences?
I'll chime in on that. Just at a very basic level, with some people that you trust, be 100% nitty-gritty, detail honest about what those experiences have been. With people that trust you and love you, to have somebody know the deepest, darkest secrets and sins in your life and look at you and go, that's messed up, and I love you, is a really healing thing. And I'll just tell you, to have the person that you love the most on the planet know the deepest, darkest, ugliest secret sins and look at you and go, that's messed up, and I love you, is a really healing thing.
That took a while, though. There was a lot of I hate you, just to be clear, before I love you.
We've got a situation over here.
That's why we put you guys over there. Yeah.
What advice would the couples that are married have for people that are not there yet, to what that looks like to do that in a healthy way and not just to even, I mean, it's not like a first date when all of a sudden you just.
Not unless you don't want a second date.
That's true. How would you recommend navigating that?
Sharing your sexual past?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
My answer to that is somewhere beyond first date, like we're in a long-term relationship, but before there's a ring. Somewhere in that space, like we're looking at a future together, but we're not engaged yet. My recommendation is for the two of you to sit down and go, here's my sexual story, as well as other story, obviously, but here's my sexual story. Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that you know who is coming into this relationship. And this sounds harsh, but if y'all don't make it through that, you just saved each other a tremendous amount of pain. And if y'all make it through that, you just poured like this tremendous foundation for your relationship from here on out. It is a mile marker moment to be able to have that kind of conversation and look across from each other. And Shirley said it took a long time. For us, it was a decade after everything hit the fan in our relationship and all the truth came out. A decade later, there was a time where we sat across from each other and went, we're both broken. There's a lot of story, and we both need Jesus. I love you just as you are, even knowing all the stuff that you've done. If you'll sit across from each other in the dating and do that, it's a good setup.
Yeah.
And I would just add, maybe that's not a future conversation. Maybe that's something you're dealing with right now. With the question, I would find a community, a place you can have a. Has anyone ever been to like liminal weekends or Crucible? Right. Having a safe place where you can confess those sins, right? Because when we confess it to God, He's faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us. But I think it's 1 Peter says, when we confess sins to one another, we're healed. So find someone, maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, a spouse, maybe it's a small group, maybe it's a Crucible weekend, a liminal weekend. But you find a place you can confess your sins to one another and be healed.
I think that's so, in my brain, the way that plays out, though, is so illogical. Like, to think through that. And so I can say I've been far from perfect in my experience with working through shame that I have from things from my past, even though it seems so illogical that I would feel better once I shared that with someone that I trusted. It's I think the best thing that I can describe it as is carrying a huge weight. That shame feels really, really heavy. And even if I'm still carrying some of that after I share that with people that I trust, like, it feels a little bit lighter to work through some of that stuff.
Yeah. That's good stuff. We're going to keep going because I know there's a lot. Can you explain why porn is harmful?
Scott?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, the reason that keeps pointing to me is because this is what I do for a living, is we like, not that!
This situation.
Oh, you have some explaining to do.
A+ right here. Not that. This is what we do for a living, is help people that are struggling with this stuff. Right? Men, wives, marriages that are dealing with this stuff. Yeah. Let me count the ways that it is harmful. From everything, I'll just be quick. Everything from it supersizes your sex drive. Let's start there. It supersizes your sex drive. It sets up unrealistic expectations of what your spouse is going to look like, do, feel like, say, sound like. It just sets up unrealistic expectations of what you're going to be like. It, as Scott spoke to earlier, it puts things in your brain that are going to come up and inform the way you experience sexual intimacy in your marriage that will degrade that relationship. And we're not even talking about how it denigrates and degrades the people that are involved in it, whether they want to be or not. And scripturally, we can point to verses that speak to illicit sexual experiences that include pornography. But just at a most broad level, it changes the way that your neurochemistry and your emotional chemistry and your physical chemistry experience sexual intimacy in a broken way.
Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead, Chell, because, well, I mean, is it okay if I point people to y'all to chat with maybe for a little after this if they want to? Because this is what they do.
To tell you how to get in the business.
No, you guys have committed a lot of time and energy, and you guys have a ministry, you guys have a nonprofit or an organization. Yeah. Okay, where they speak on this stuff a lot, and so they are here to help in this area, and they're here to offer some insight and wisdom. So I appreciate that. Cool. Let's go to the next one. See, is it okay for me to date somebody who isn't a Christian? How important is faith when it comes to looking for a partner? Taylor and Brandon, could you guys speak to that, just being in a season of navigating dating right now?
Can try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I would say for me, kind of going back to one of the first questions that we talked about of like what you look for in another person to date. Something I would add to that answer is someone who makes you better. And for me, that applies to every area of my life. First and foremost, my faith, just because it's the most important to me. And so if that's important to me, it has to be important to the person that I'm dating, especially if it's a relationship that I want to last. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to community too. Like the people you have around you kind of dictate where you're going to go. And especially someone who you're dating, because that's just such a close relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that comes down to communication in boundaries and expectations. I think Jason said something about making sure that you expect your partner or your spouse to change. But I also think it's really important to not have expectations of what some of those changes will be. And so I think we're also framing this as people that are following Jesus, right? And so as I continue to lean more into what it looks like for me to get closer to God, to be closer in relationship with Him, that's growing my faith more in Him, right? Into the things that He says are the best way to live life, even if they don't make sense to me. And I think the Bible is really clear about being equally yoked in a relationship. And so for me personally, that's not something that I'm willing to pursue, at least seriously. And it's really important. But that's just my perspective on that.
That's great. Thank you for that perspective.
So as someone who was a non-Christian and was dating a Christian, I thought most Christians were self-righteous a-holes, but those are my issues. And so that would be my answer. Like, why would I want to date a Christian? Because they were so self-righteous versus someone who I found who truly had not a judgmental, I'm better, but truly I need Jesus because I'm broken. And we're all broken. The humility, right? And so, and I don't know if I'd have found Jesus if it wasn't for my wife, right? So I'm trying to get emotional, sorry. But if she hadn't dated me, I may not be here, right? And so, but I also was searching. So I think it's okay to date a Christian, or non-Christian, I'm sorry. if they have, I was searching, right? I wasn't against God. I just didn't know, right? And there's a difference. And there are people who are, well, I'm an atheist and there is no God. Well, yeah, that may be a non-starter, but yeah, I don't know who this God is. Maybe I'm agnostic. I don't know what's going on. And that's where I was. I just didn't know anything, and so I was searching. And so it was because of her. She was the link in the chain that led me to Christ. And so, be discerning. I agree with don't marry them. That's the equal the yoke part if they're not a believer. But I think it's okay to date if they have depending on where they are if they're searching or they, does that make sense?
Thanks for sharing that, Scott. Yeah, that's good. Alrighty. I think we have a few more. Is that right? Okay. Is there a threshold of abuse you can get through in a relationship? Wow. How do you feel strong when leaving that relationship? Wow. Thank you for asking that question.
I think Jason said something earlier about this. The things that drive you crazy in the dating relationship or the things that are a little off in the dating relationship are magnified when you're married. So if there are red flags right now, don't walk, run. It's not worth you being in that relationship any longer than you have to be. And you are worth more than that. They should treat you that way.
And it's really hard to leave an abusive relationship. And so kind of the second piece of that question, like how can you be strong? And so I think, again, back to community and having others around you that are supporting you when you decide it's time to go is really important, because oftentimes, again, in those abusive relationships, there's such a power differential, and the person being abused feels about this big.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important, the community piece.
Yeah. I don't think you can get out and maybe even feel strong for years and years and years because you feel so small. You can't get out, you can't get out without help. Like, you need community, you need people coming around you because of what abuse can do to you psychologically and mentally. So surround yourself with the right people. And if that was you, come and chat afterward. We'll make sure we get you guys surrounded with some people who can walk you through that. Almost done. How do we abstain from sex, yet not get married too young or too early, with sex being such a motivation to get married? Yeah. We used to say around here, like, when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing can become a destructive thing. Sex is a really good thing, and it's a good gift, and it's a good gift of marriage. I think the church, in my experience, we have pressured marriage to a degree, because you have to get married fast because you have to have sex, and you can't refrain from sex for too long. So if you're dating for too long, we're under the assumption that you're probably already having sex. And that's just a lot of pressure. And there's already a lot of pressure to date and to be a single person in general. So I kind of just want to acknowledge that like, sex being such a motivation to get married. Well, what about the person? Like, do you as an individual, and I feel like I'm speaking a lot to women, I want to be known. I want to be pursued. It's the number one thing in my marriage right now. When Connor doesn't put chia seeds in my eggs, he's like, I know you, I promise. You are known, but I forgot the chia seeds. I'm like, oh, just put. Oh, vote me off. I want to be known. There's so much more to us than just physical. That's what I mean. There's so much more to us than just physical. God created us. We're made in his image and likeness. And we are way more intimately deep than we give ourselves credit for, apart from sex. I hope that's answering.
just because I waited didn't mean I didn't desire it. So don't think that, oh, she's just the oddball on the stage that just didn't have those desires. I had the desires. I wanted that part. But again, there's so much more to marriage than sex. The emotional portion of a marriage is so rich and so wonderful, and it actually intensifies the sexual part of your marriage when that's good. So if we're just going for one aspect of the marriage, we're missing so much that's there as a gift for you.
I was just going to say, I watched countless relationships in college of people had sex and then tried to have the relationship after they had already had sex, and those rarely worked. And by us waiting till we were married, you share that, like the intimacy we had, the emotional connection, the spiritual, the sex was the icing on the cake. It wasn't the cake. It also, yeah, we didn't first consummate our marriage out of the first night, so there's a theme here. Anyway, just kidding.
I was going to say, the sexual part of your marriage doesn't come quickly. There's a process. You're getting to know each other. You're getting to know what he enjoys, what I enjoy. You're getting to know each other on a different level. But there's a safety in that because you know you're committed to the relationship, so there's a comfort in that as well. So it's not you're single today and you're married tomorrow and it's all fixed. There's a process. It took us 10 years to get to the point where we felt really comfortable with each other in the bedroom. 10 years. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. You know, we had moments of greatness, but now
Goes for you.
But I'm just saying, it took us a while to get to the point where we were feeling.
We got a situation over here.
I don't want you to have a false idea of once you're married, it's all figured out. There's so much to discover in your spouse.
Yep. That's good. All right, Christian. Can you speak on love being a choice, not a feeling? What is the difference? It's a good question.
Can you speak on love being a choice? I think being in love starts as a feeling. Staying in love is a choice.
Good answer.
I don't think I'm going to answer the question, but what's coming to mind is I do feel like being in love ebbs and flows more so, and that's just a part of the process. Like there's times when love is more the commitment. Is that the word that they used? Being a choice. And then there's times when love is more of a feeling, but I just see it more so ebbing and flowing, and not so much like, yeah, we used to be in love, I used to feel that way, but not anymore forever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think you get to figure this out in dating too, because to me, love is a choice. Is like, I'm not gonna walk out on you. You know, like there's situations like abuse and things like that that I want to acknowledge that are different, but like my choice to love Connor is like, I might hate you today, but I'm not gonna use that as an excuse, or I'm not gonna, I'm gonna grow out of love with you, but I'm not leaving you. I'm not gonna walk away from you.
Damn chia seeds.
Because the chia seeds.
Half the people are probably like, what are chia seeds? That's the weird thing about me.
I would add to that also, I think that's really good and really true that also in dating, love is a choice. There's times when my boyfriend drives me crazy and I have to choose to remember why I want to date him. And I think that there's a balance there in dating, in that like when those moments come up, it's like, is this something, you still have room. It's like, I haven't committed to this person, so I'm not married to them and I don't have to figure it out, but do I want to? And I think that's kind of where the choice comes in.
I've never hated you, by the way, Connor. Sorry, just to clarify. I love you. All right, can you give me one piece of encouragement? I think this is the last question. Is that right? Okay. Last question. Can you give me one piece of encouragement or advice as a young adult who is trying to navigate all of this? This is the last question.
It was the lamp. It was the lamp.
Right now. Yep, so let's just go let's just go through the line. Brandon?
I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I feel like as a man who's trying to navigate this as a single guy, trying to have the self-awareness of when I'm feeling really alone, and then surrounding myself with people that I trust and that love me and that I can be vulnerable with, to just put that out there. I think that's a really great thing.
That's good.
I've said it a couple of times tonight, but you're worth waiting for.
Thanks, Julie.
Wow, that was quick. I was thinking about something else. Okay. I would say that we serve and love a God of redemption, that we're going to make mistakes. We didn't do it perfectly. We still don't do it perfectly. I can look back and see him redeeming all the dumb decisions we made along the way. And that would be my encouragement to you, that you're not going to do this so perfectly, and that's okay. And God still loves you, and God is still near, and he can fix those broken places in your lives and your relationships.
I would say dating is hard, but there is no love like the love of Jesus, truly. And that is just so important to keep in mind, because there isn't a person that can fulfill that for you. And yeah, that's just so important in dating, in singleness, in marriage, I imagine. Yeah, so.
That's good.
I've been like, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? Oh, gosh, getting close. What do I say? Okay, so off the cuff, I would just say, one, I think it's awesome that you guys are asking these questions, and just to give yourself space to keep grappling with all of this and keep asking the questions, keep talking about it. I wish that I had done more of that at your age. So I just think it's awesome.
Yeah, and kind of echo what Scott said a second ago. There's no formula. There's not, it's so much a process, and we're all becoming as we go through, and trying to give yourself permission to become as you go. I think so much of Scripture is built around like the process of becoming, and so much of God's story ultimately is written as what's happening and becoming, and giving yourself permission to be in that and not have it figured out. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it's good. I would just say, like, we're really hard on ourselves, too. Yeah. So, like, let yourself off the mat and give yourself some grace, because Jesus does. And he's with you in it all, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, you have someone to walk through that with. And like Taylor said, it really is the best relationship. It's what our hearts are actually craving, yearning for. I don't know how you walked in here tonight as like a believer, or churched or unchurched. It doesn't matter. Like, if you would be willing to lean into the relationship that Jesus offers, I think it's the best. I think it's the best one that you can find for many reasons. But it starts with one area of your life, you know. Don't put so much pressure on yourself to have it all figured out. Start where he's leading you. Yeah. Can we give it up for these people who join us tonight? And then I'm putting you on the spot, Jason, but Jason, will you pray us out? Will you pray us out? Oh, sure. Cool.
God, I thank you for your presence in this room. Pray that you would help us give ourselves permission to not have it all figured out. Like Ambry said a second ago, let ourselves off the mat some. we do honor that you have high standards and that you've designed things certain ways to work for the best. And at the same time, we know in our own strength we can't achieve that, and we need you in real time on a Thursday night. So we just thank you that you're faithful to us, that you're committed to us, and as is said around here so often, that you'll keep every promise that you make, whether in singleness or in marriage. So thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, y'all.
All right. We know we didn't get to every question tonight, so we're just going to keep doing this and hopefully post some of these on our social media and maybe be asking some of you guys. I don't know. But there's cupcakes out there and coffee if you guys want to hang out with us for a little bit. Cool. I feel bad about